Hi, I'm Tom Griesgraber, and you're watching ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com. Coming to you today on location in the world headquarters of Stick Enterprises, which actually happens to be the home of Emmett Chapman, where we are right now, with Stick virtuoso Tom Griesgraber. Hey, Tom.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
You are, it's interesting. We've interviewed a handful of stick players, and they are all on one of our other websites called ForBassPlayersOnly.com. And I thought it was appropriate to include this interview on ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com because you are originally a guitar player. You went to Berkeley, and then somehow you discovered the stick and changed your life. Or, set the story straight. What exactly happened? How did you make that transition from guitar to stick?
Sure. I mean, to try to summarize years, but I did go to Berkeley and loved every minute of it. And I was focused enough on guitar that, I'd wake up and probably start practicing at like 7:30 in the morning, and you'd be doing it until midnight every night. After 4 years of that or whatever, I graduated. I had about a year in there where I was still playing guitar and doing some kind of pop rock bands and things, but I'd always kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. And having spent that much time really focused on guitar and guitar-oriented music, I think I was just a little ready to do something else. And it actually came about at a NAMM trade show, and Stick Enterprises had booths there for years and still a member. And there was an event at night where actually Tony Levin was playing with a trio with Jerry Murata on Taos drums and a flute player named Steve Gorn. And they'd just recorded an album in a cave in upstate New York. And they were playing this music.
A cave in New York?
Yeah.
How many caves are there in New York?
Not in the city, right? The state. But I don't know about the city.
I've been in some establishments that are like caves in New York.
Yeah. No, they did this thing that was like largely improv. And if you think about the sound of a cave, I mean, it's very reflective. There's a lot of ambient echo and things. So I think a lot of the parts Tony was playing were fairly simple. There was a lot of space in the music. But I remember sitting in the audience and watching him play, and he would play these little stick riffs that the flute player could solo over. And it just struck me. I thought, this doesn't quite sound like guitar. This doesn't quite sound like bass or piano. But I could watch his hands and at least understand rhythmically what was going on. I had no idea the tuning and, what the chord voicings were or anything. But I came home, that was like January of 97. I came home going, I think I want to get one of those. And it was still relatively early days of the internet, but there was a Stick email list, and I found somebody selling a used one. I think they were in North Carolina, and I just kind of blindly sent them a check, and they sent me this thing, and it showed up in the summer of that year. And I just remember my first impression, getting it out of the box and like sitting with it on my lap and looking at it and going, what have I just done? Like, what is this thing? And I kind of put it on the floor, and I just looked at it for a while. And I thought originally it would be like a sort of a double to guitar.
Yeah, excuse me, how many strings were on that particular model?
That was a 10.
Okay.
That was an old Ironwood 10 from the 70s.
So 5 of the strings were tuned in fifths and 5 were tuned in fourths.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My mind is already blown, but go.
Yeah. So, but it was funny because it was, like I said, I originally thought, well, I'll use this as a double to guitar. And I started writing little riffs and little parts on it, and I was still playing with this pop rock band. And the easiest thing to get going on it really was the bass side. And I kind of upset the balance in this band I was playing in, because I'd show up to rehearsals as like one of the main writers and be like, okay, here's a new idea for a song, but bass player, can you do something on rhythm guitar? Because I want to play the bass on this thing. And they just, I kind of totally upset the dynamic of the band, and then found myself shortly without a band. and at that point I thought, this instrument is so amazing, even just on its own, that if I get together a solo repertoire on this, then career-wise, I always have that to fall back on. I can go do collaborations with any number of people, but I can always also go do the solo thing.
Well, beyond your initial reaction, your initial introduction, how did that affect your thinking did you think not like a guitar player anymore, or not exactly like a bass player, or trying to combine the two, or all of the above, none of the above?
Yeah, no, it's its own instrument. I mean, my training was in guitar, and that's what my study was. But I'd always played bass on my own too. I always had basses as well, and I always feel a little, undertrained on bass or something because I didn't study it formally. But
It's not as easy as we make it look.
yeah, yeah. But I still to date can play bass and guitar on people's projects and whatever. But the stick, it not only upsets that line, that octave divide, it upsets and changes the chord voicings, and it changes the way notes interact. And it's in some ways more similar to a piano, but it's not a piano either. It's something new.
It's its own thing.
It really is. Yeah, because you have one of the things I realized early on was I think I had Emmett's book, Freehands, and just learning basic chord voicings in the fifths side of the instrument. And you play these open voiced chords where, guitar, you have some chords that are open voiced, and you have some where the notes are right next to each other, stacked, as a triad or whatever. But you play this low register open chord of like root up to the fifth, up to the 10th, and going, wow, yeah, you wouldn't naturally do that on bass or guitar. And it was just a new thing, and you could start coming up with little rhythmic parts or riffs out of it, and they just sounded fresh. They sounded different. Even listening to other stick players, which I did a lot early. I actually hosted an internet radio show of all stick music for a while. And so I would get all these CDs from stick players and things.
That's a niche following, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. That's a whole other story. But these people were starting this world music thing, and they gave me 90 minutes every week to just play stick players. So I was getting CDs from people all over the world and hearing all this stick music. But you could still hear that it was a new enough vehicle that even with all these players, a lot of them doing originals, nobody was really sounding like each other. They weren't really... Everybody kind of has their own sound and their own voice, and it hasn't been so kind of worn into the established ground.
Because there's so many things you can do with it.
Right, right.
Well, you've done a lot of stuff with Agent 22 and a lot of solo stuff, a lot of collaborations.
Yeah.
What's keeping you busy these days?
A lot of production and studio stuff the last year or so. It's almost a blessing and a curse because I have a big studio, and it only ever started to be for my own music. But as I kind of had other friends I was collaborating with or whatnot, bringing them into play on my solo projects, people have asked me to help with their projects in a variety of ways. And that everything...
Primarily on the stick, or mostly, or...
The roles are everything. I mean, some of the projects, like last year or so, I engineered an album for the California Guitar Trio, who I've been friends with and toured as an opener with. So I was basically just the engineer on that, except they did a cover of the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations, and I was like, well, I got a theremin. I'll do the theremin parts. So I have this little cameo on theremin, which is way harder than playing the stick. Yeah. But other things like Ryan Moran, the drummer from Agent 22, has been working on his second solo record for a while, where he brings in kind of interesting grooves and maybe a little synth part or something, and he a lot of times just has kind of one idea, and I help him write the rest of the piece, and then we just orchestrate it and ornament it in the most unusual ways we can think of. So the stick certainly falls in that category. Playing a little bit of NS stick on this one as well, and also guitar and bass and synths and just kind of all kinds of things. So but that's sort of the range. Like I could just be the engineer, I could be in a producer role, I could be just playing on it. I just kind of fill in the gaps, whatever people need.
What about the future, Tom? Is there something that you've always wanted to do that just haven't gotten around to yet?
Oh, collaborations are always exciting, and I've been lucky to do some really nice ones, and I'm always kind of looking around like who would be good, because again, the stick is such a unique thing that sometimes if nobody's necessarily played with a stick player before, you need to have somebody that can kind of adapt what they do a little bit around you and vice versa. But I've been writing new material for another solo record. I've got most of it kind of plotted
You've
out.
got quite a few. What do you have, about 7 or something like that?
There's like 7 albums total. There's 2 solo albums. There's 2 with Bert Lahms from the California Guitar Trio. There's 2 with Agent 22, and then the one with Jerry Murata. But yeah, I think this is going to be probably another solo album, and I have most of the material together for it and just need to get to work on it.
Well, when can we all watch for that and have that accessible to everybody?
It'll be a little while because the holdup has been working on all these projects for other people. So I've got 2 more albums in the pipeline right now for other people, but they're both coming to completion. I think one of them will finish the end of this year for sure. The other one may trail off for a bit, but I think once this Ryan's solo album is together, then I can really start on mine.
That's what happens when you're in demand.
Apparently. Yeah.
Last question, Tom. What would you be if you weren't a guitar player or a stick player or an engineer or a producer or any of the other musically oriented things you are? What would you be outside of music?
Homeless? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I crossed that bridge mentally and committed to being in music, in high school years.
It's funny, a lot of people don't become homeless until they become a musician. So good for you. You've got something figured out. Well, it's such a pleasure sitting down and talking to you, getting to know you. The stick is a fascinating thing, and it's great to see all the amazing things that it can do and that you've done with it, and how I wonder how much farther it's been taken than what Emmett Chapman originally conceived when he first came up with the instrument. So much luck and continued success to you always, and keep us posted on that record. We hope it'll come out soon.
Well, thanks.
On location at the world headquarters of Stick Enterprises, somewhere in Southern California, with our good friend Tom Griesgraber. I'm John Liebman. You're watching ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com.